Hello and welcome back to the Ecuador Insider Podcast. I'm Jesse Bayer, the founder of Abundant Living Ecuador. Joined today, familiar words rolling off the tongue, by Darnell Dunn. Darnell is a dear friend of mine. We actually came to Ecuador together, founded Abundant Living together. He has since moved on to Cuenca and is running a real estate company there. And I wanted to bring him back on the show, really just to have an honest conversation about Ecuador. Two guys who have been here about somewhere around 5.5 years now, and we've had a lot of experiences. You know, we've lived in different places, we've run businesses, we've bought and sold real estate, and had a million interactions with a million people, learned Spanish, etc. So we can really shed a lot of light on Ecuador for people, and so that's why I brought Darnell on. Darnell is obviously an expert in real estate, especially the Cuenca market where he is now. He spent several years in Loja as well, so he has a lot of understanding of this market as well. So Darnell, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming. Good to see you. How are you?
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me. It's good to be back.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Good. Cannot complain. We made it through the cold time here. It's been nice now for a couple of months. I know that's even a little cooler where you are. So I'm always happy when it's sunny and warm.
And yeah, that weather's starting to change. End of October, November to getting into January is spectacular here in Ecuador. I really look forward to it.
Yeah, as do I. All right, let's dive right in. I think, given your expertise, it makes sense to talk some about Cuenca and about real estate there. So let's give me the bird's eye view, real estate. The snapshot, the bullet point of real estate market in Cuenca today.
Okay, I feel like it's really been the best time since I've been here for buyers, and going back to around the time that we came here, 2014, late 2014, late 2015, the economy took a real big dip when you saw oil prices go down. Ecuador is part of OPEC, so that definitely took the punch bowl away from all of the government spending-driven growth that was going on here, leading up to us coming here and all the positive things we read. A lot of smoke and mirrors.
Your punch bowl. You're going back to your Wall Street days there. Yeah, go ahead.
Old habits die hard. So anyway, so you saw that the economy take a huge hit. That started to reflect in prices over a period of time. You then had some unfavorable legislation with the new capital gains tax law and inheritance law, earthquake as well too. We're going back to 2016. Mm-hmm. So you had all these negative factors really impacting sentiment and capital that was willing to come to the table to purchase property. So obviously sales happened during that period of time, but there was a really big lull. Then you had about 1.5 to 2 years ago, that capital gains tax law was taken off the table, the inheritance sometime before that. And what I noticed, certainly in Loja and definitely here in Cuenca, is that people felt like that was going to change sentiment towards just being more positive. And I had a lot of sellers come to me and say that they wanted to raise the prices. Obviously, you can't tell somebody that you're working with that you're not going to do it, but you share your recommendations and you can use that as an opportunity to decide whether you want to continue to do business with that person. So that was a conversation that I had a lot of. And really, it didn't have any effect with sales. There's just kind of this malaise over the market. And I feel like just recently here, at least here in Cuenca, that disconnect between buyers and sellers, I think that's sort of going away. And I'll give you 3 concrete examples of properties I'm working with. There's a popular neighborhood called Puertas del Sol here in Cuenca. And we had a condo that I think was, at the market price, but certainly it wouldn't have sold at the listing price, and it was a 3-bedroom in one of the nicer condo buildings in Cuenca. in one of the nicer neighborhoods, as I mentioned. Great amenities, 3 years old, about 1,300 square feet. The owners were asking $185,000. They recently dropped that to $160,000. Assuming that they give another discount of maybe 10%, I think that could close in a very short period of time. So I think that's, there's maybe a market price that the municipality or, a real estate agent who wants your business might give you, and then there's the price that things actually sell for. And I think, that's certainly a property that I can say fits that mold. Another one is a condo right off of Remigio Crespo, which is one of the main streets in Cuenca, very similar to 24 de Mayo and Loja, really happening place. You've got supermarkets, you've got restaurants, you've got ice cream shops, you've got lawyers. There's a mix of all kinds of uses on the street, so there's always traffic. Things are always happening and moving. And you've got a penthouse there, 2-story penthouse overlooking the city. Lots of public transportation around, lots of restaurants, lots of things to do, as I mentioned. And this was a place that was selling at $220,000, and the owner just recently reduced it to $190,000, which was less than what she paid for it 3 years ago. I think that reflects, where the market is. Will she have to come down to sell it? I think so, but it's much closer to what it will close at. And finally, another property that I think is a property that anybody who's looking at a computer, thinking about moving to Latin America, that's their dream home. 13,500 square feet, 6 bedrooms, 6 baths, built in 1850. The original home of the first Archbishop of Cuenca, 3 blocks away from the center square of Cuenca. The owner sunk almost $2 million in renovating it. Was originally listing it at $3 million. Had an offer from a buyer for $2.25 about 3 years ago. Rejected it. Hasn't gotten an offer anywhere close since. He's now reduced the price to $1.4 million, which is $400,000 less than the money that he put in to renovate it, not including what he paid for it. So I think that those are 3 real strong examples of what's happening in the market, and I expect that trend to continue for the foreseeable future.
Interesting. So market's down in general.
Yeah, I would say so. I just feel like people, the people who are coming to the table, there's still expats coming in. There's still Ecuadorian buyers. But I think that what people are willing to pay for these properties, I think has changed over the last, since Ecuador has become a expat destination. I mean, call that, I don't know, maybe a 10-year period or something like that. Going back to 2008, give or take. Yeah. 2006, maybe.
Yeah, 10, 15 years, yeah.
So, I feel like we came in at the peak.
Yeah, well, we came in at the end, I think. I think past peak, but barely. What do expats support the market in Cuenca? Do they have a meaningful role in the market there?
In
Cuenca?
Real?
Yeah.
Are
there? Yeah.
I would say so, but certainly more for sellers than buyers. A much higher percentage of the sellers that I have here in Cuenca are expats than they were in Cuenca or in Loja. Even if you factor in when I say Loja, I'm including Vilcabamba, Malacatos, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's just a lot. It's just a much larger expat.
Right. Yeah, because in this market, expats have no role in prices. So I'm just wondering, in Cuenca, do they play a role in values?
Yeah, definitely, because they have many of them bought at a time where the market was much hotter.
Yeah.
And where the buzz around Ecuador as an expat destination was much higher. And so they have certain price expectations when they're selling, and so that definitely has an impact on the prices, because properties that expats own are properties that other expats who are in the market are thinking about buying.
Yeah. Has the money come back to Ecuador? So, things went south at the end of 14, got really bad in 15 and 16, have been recovering since very mildly. Have you seen that? A lot of money left the country in 15 and 16. Has that money come back, in your opinion?
I don't know what metric I would use to measure that, to be able to answer that question. Maybe, is there something that you have in mind? Maybe you could point me in a direction.
I guess I'm just curious, just your observations. So for me, as I look at the overall market in real estate, but really the economy more broadly speaking, Ecuador had a boom under Correa, then a bust the last 2 years of Correa, and then stabilization since then. And I've seen a much different market now than in, let's say, pre-14, where there was just a lot more high-end interest, a lot more investment dollars, and I've seen some of that like creep back. But like from my perspective, if I were asking myself the same question, I would say that money has not returned. Some portion of it, given that we've had political stability and people aren't as concerned, obviously, as they were the last couple of years of Correa. But I've still seen. I still feel like we're very much in the effects of that big scare that we had in 15 and 16.
I would say the same thing. And what I would attribute that to, at least compared to the United States, is that there's no meaningful price mechanism here. Not enough, properties. You can go to the MLS in the United States and find out, okay, how to price your property, because you've got all this pricing data to show you.
Sure.
Okay, the properties of a similar, in a similar location with similar characteristics sold at this. We've got 10 sales that happened in the last 2 months between this street and this street. Here's a range of what you should expect. And so that, and then you have, 90, I don't know, it's got to be 9 out of 10 properties that are sold in the United States are sold to a broker overall. And very few people buy cash.
Right.
So there's just a lot more data that you can use to come to those conclusions, and that sort of filters through the market. Here, there's not really a mechanism for that.
Yeah, price discovery.
That leads to prices being all over the place, and that leads to what you just described, which is, this malaise that we've been in, of stabilization, but that catalyst for money going out or money coming in is not really there per se. It's sort of something that I assume will evolve over time.
Yeah.
People will just kind of stumble across it and decide, okay, yeah, I want to put some money in Ecuador. I certainly think, in this, we can sort of cover this at some point in the call. I've looked at some new legislation here in Ecuador that I think sets the table for the investor, making Ecuador the kind of investment destination that we maybe thought it could be initially, in that it turned out that it wasn't. And I think there's some laws on the books now that certainly make Ecuador a place to look at for investors. Interesting.
Well, jump in. What do you got for that? What have you seen?
Okay, so there's obviously Ecuador, as being a country that uses the U.S. dollar, hamstrings it somewhat from being able to manage their foreign currency reserves and things like that.
Yeah,
and it's also a country that's gotten themselves into major debt.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a law that was signed called the Ley de Fomento Productivo, back in May that makes some sweeping changes to the tax code for investors. So, for example, if you're starting a new business in Quito or Guayaquil, for example, the two largest cities in the country, before there was a law that allowed you to, if you were in a certain industry, to not pay income taxes for 5 years. That's been extended to 8 years in those places, and to, I guess the logic behind this is to spread around the development outside of the most developed places. Anywhere outside of that, you're talking about 10 years minimum. Yeah. And then depending on the business it is or where it's located, you can get an income tax exemption of out to 20 years.
Yeah.
Depending on where you establish the business, you could potentially write off your employment expenses of all 100% of that up to 5 years, plus lots of different deductions and things like that. So, if you're talking about export-related businesses, import substitution, agriculture, tourism, to name a few, I think those are industries that definitely are make sense to look at Ecuador for. I actually have a client who I sold a property to about 1.5 years ago. They bought a property out in Zamora, and the gentleman is from South Africa, and he's worked and consulted for companies that make consumer products out of aloe vera, things like shampoo, soap, deodorant, toothpaste, those kinds of things. And he purchased a piece of land so that he could do a farm to product operation. Has all these formulas for all these different things, wants to do that in Ecuador. And so, helped him close on the property, and, now we're in conversations about, getting his business set up and getting him financing. And for somebody like him, even Supermaxi is, the largest supermarket in the country, they have a law on the books that requires them to stock their shelves with 30% of artisanal products that are produced in Ecuador. And I actually went and looked this up when I was kind of pitching him the idea of helping him with starting up his business. There's not one deodorant that you can find in Supermaxi that's made in Ecuador. So if you talk about import substitution for a country that uses a foreign currency, that the benefits for the government in terms of managing their reserves and cash and in keeping the economy moving is hard to be estimated. So those are some of the opportunities that I'm seeing in the economy, and we've got a couple of other clients that we're talking to about potentially positioning themselves here in Ecuador.
Yeah, interesting, very interesting stuff. Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's funny too, because it's almost like we haven't seen those effects yet of those tax breaks, and and I mean Moreno announced as well a phasing out of the 5% capital flight tax. I haven't seen any movement on that since he announced it, but it's out there. It'll probably happen at some point. I think that would be a huge win for investors, certainly, as well.
It's funny. Well, in that law, there are definitely some exemptions for business owners for the capital flight tax now. So there are ways of getting around it for people who are involved in business, not for individuals necessarily. Yeah. But that's great news. I hadn't actually heard of that. It's so funny because I remember a podcast that we did a while back about the whole presidential election when he was elected and all the noise around that. And it's funny because if that ends up going through, Moreno would have done almost everything that the candidate that we wanted, Lasso, said he was going to do.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of a funny turn of events.
It is. I think. It is. Okay, let's jump back to Cuenca. Well, let's skip the economy. We've covered enough of that. What are you seeing there trends-wise as far as expats? Are they coming? Are they leaving? Who are they? What are you seeing? What are you seeing overall in Cuenca?
Yeah, I see a lot of people looking. I would say that in terms of inflows and outflows, it's about as many people coming as going. There was a study that Cuenca High Life did a couple years ago, and I looked at it when I was living, back in Loja, and now being here in Cuenca and having spent almost 2 years here. You definitely see that on the street. Within 3 years, 50% of the people who came leave.
Yeah, I saw that.
I think that's just how it is. I think expat life just isn't for everybody.
No.
And so for as much, people can shout from the highest mountaintop about how great it is and how cheap everything is. That's the big thing. Oh, how cheap everything is. People think Ecuador is so cheap. And, the light, you got all these jokers, I'll call them, for lack of a better term, who get on their soapbox and talk about, this is the cost of living, and I went to the supermarket, and look how much I can buy, and all this other stuff. And it's like, if that's why you're coming here, don't come.
Yeah.
And not only for my own selfish reasons, but more so for yourself.
Yeah.
Because if that's the reason why you come to Ecuador or any country that you're not from for that reason, it's not going to work for you. It's got to be something that speaks to you, that you, whatever process you have, you look at it and you say, you know what, I think Ecuador is going to be a fit for me. I'm going to go check it out, or I'm going to go do that, and just make a decision.
Yeah.
Got a lot of people, a lot of fence sitters, a lot of people who are just wishy-washy. And I can tell you from personal experience how many people I've seen that just it didn't work for, and there's a common thread throughout. And I think that's one of it. It's just the lack of being able to make a firm decision. Though there's other parts of their lives that will affect, but not like moving to a foreign country.
Yeah.
And being away from your creature comforts and not being around lots of people, having expectations of people who are going to come and visit you that are just not anywhere close to reality.
Yeah.
It's going to come and visit you.
Right. Right.
For the most part, for the average person, just,
yeah.
I've been here 5 years. I've had one family member come and visit me twice.
Yeah.
And that happens to be the person that brought me into the world. So,
yeah.
I don't know what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think your advice is spot on. And I do think it comes down to being successful at this or not, because that's really what it's about. And I think you could sort of sum it up as culture shock. Culture shock is a real thing. There's layers to it. And coming here because things are cheap or for some other reason that's not rooted in being called here or having something you really want to do or some sort of positive action reason, when that culture, when the negative stuff hits of living somewhere you're not used to, whether that's the cultural stuff or otherwise, you're gonna leave at that point. If your only reasons to be here are it's cheap or those sorts of things. So yeah, I mean, come for the right reasons, I think is the main point and that I take from that. And be prepared for, very large differences. And also, if we're on the subject, something that I've noticed, like you talked about a thread running through people who don't end up staying, and I would argue that there's a thread there, and then there's a thread through people who do end up staying. And if I had to sort of on the spot sum that up, I would say the people who stay and enjoy it here came for good reasons and have the capacity, ability, and energy and want to of rolling with the punches because that's huge. Not killing people when it feels like they're messing with you, or it's hard to get stuff done because of just the way the culture or the government is. So rolling with the punches, taking things in stride, and being proactive in their affairs. I think those to me are really like the two things that make you successful here. It's like if you can handle change and you can handle rolling with it when things are different than you expected and things are happening that you don't understand and all that, and you're proactive in your affairs, like you oversee what you're doing in a proactive way, you can make it here.
I have not heard that summed up so succinctly before. That's
thank you.
If I had the words to describe it, I would like to think that I would have described it just like that.
Wow, that's a very big compliment. Thank you. On the other, go ahead.
You expressed enough the being proactive in your affairs.
Yeah.
Because that's a big one that hangs people up with culture shock. Because if I could break down culture shock in one term, I would say mismatched expectations.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You think coming from the United States, it's the biggest, baddest country in the world. We do things this way. That's how the rest of the world is.
No.
It's not even close to that here. And so you're just gonna rough and tumble that. You're gonna rough and tumble that, and better to rough and tumble it being on the front foot as opposed to the back foot.
Yeah.
Not saying, okay, well, the lawyer said they were going to get back to me and I haven't heard from them. And it's been so long and this, that, and the third. Pick up the phone.
Yeah. That's a great example. Let's use that example. So, because I think that's an aspect of the culture that everyone is an adjustment. If you're coming from, the states where we come from, for example, or some similar culture.
Person didn't return my call. Oh, they don't want my business. Oh, I'm going elsewhere.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't want to get off.
No, that's fine. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt either. But just taking that example. So you're calling somebody and you're wanting somebody to do something and they're dropping the ball. Okay? From your perspective. So you're wanting something done. It's not happening. You have a few options. You can fire them, you can call them and ask, you can show up at their office and say hello, you can invite them to dinner, you can get really angry, you can talk bad about them to all your friends. You've got like a handful of options. And what happens to people here is they make the wrong assumption about what's happening because they don't understand the culture, and then the action ends up being getting angry or ignoring them or talking bad about them or something like that. And there's just a lot of those cultural things that you have to adjust to. And I think that's, to me, why it goes back to rolling with the punches and figuring it out. Because it's like, me and you can explain that to somebody. Until you've experienced it, you will not figure it out. I mean,
just going in one ear and out the other. Because people won't have a context for foundationing that concept in reality because they've never experienced it.
Yeah. And it's so different. Like, if somebody in the States doesn't return your phone call that has a significance that everyone understands, the significance here of actions are not the same as the significance of actions where I'm from.
And that's culture shock in a nutshell.
Yeah. I think so.
Mismatched expectations. When you do something where you're from, there's a path for that. There's a glide path. Okay, I do this, he does that, she does this, he does that. This means this means that. That's not the same here. It just isn't. And so rolling with the punches involves navigating that, figuring that out in and it's just painful.
Yeah. There's going to be pain involved.
But it's an incredible life experience, and it gives you a totally different perspective. Along with the language, that definitely plays a role too, because
Yes.
culture is tied to language as well. Just like in the States, you've got a guy from where I'm from isn't gonna express himself the same way as somebody from across, from California.
Sure.
There's that sort of give and take, figuring out where somebody's coming from as well too. That just feels a lot more comfortable in your native language.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's
no, and it's either painful or fun. I mean, a mix of the two. But like your success here is going to be based on, is it painful to you more, or is it more fun figuring this stuff out? Because
the juice worth the squeeze.
Is what?
Is the juice worth the squeeze?
Right. Right.
And that's what everybody's got to figure out.
Yeah. No, that's right. Last piece on this stuff, and I don't even think this is a topic we were necessarily going to get into, but it's a good one. Last piece on this stuff. So, I just lost my train of thought right when I was saying that, but it was a good point. I want to see if I can remember it. Culture shock. Figuring that out. Oh yeah, okay. So the last piece that I think kind of hurts people a lot who come here are, and it goes back to your point about expectations, are having fantasies about what this place is, and then when and not facing the reality of what it is, which is just a country. It's just a place to live. It's not Wonderland.
Shangri-La.
It's not Shangri-La, exactly. It's,
Let me repeat that for the listeners. It's not Shangri-La.
Yeah. I mean, like when I list the pros and cons of Ecuador, the pros come out on top for me, barely, but they do. Like I like it here. I think it's a good place to live. But it has cons, and if you come here thinking I'm going to go to cure my sickness and I'm going to, what's that?
There's a lot of those people.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going to cure what ails me. I'm going to go to this like connected with nature, indigenous place where everybody is living in harmony or something. No, it's not that doesn't exist here. It's not that you can't have a healthy lifestyle here. In fact, it's very conducive to that. It's not that you can't find even great indigenous groups who are awesome, who you can do all kinds of cool stuff with. but that's not what.
Oh man, that was such a subtle jab. Oh man, like.
Well, I don't know,
Yeah.
but well, I'm glad I'm making you laugh.
Yeah. Sorry,
That's okay.
I'm showing my true colors here. As a cynic.
No, but I mean, no, that's fine. The only point I'm making is that life here is the same as, it's very different in lots of ways, but it has the same day-to-day, this is life thing. And so you've got to worry about security, not because it's dangerous here, but just because it's the world in 2018. And people litter and people don't care about each other. And I don't mean like culturally. I just mean like the things that you want to get away from are also here. And the government sucks. And there's all kinds of, there's all kinds of stuff. Whatever your shtick is, you're going to run into stuff you don't like. And so...
Add to that, too. I would say with those examples that you brought up, people looking for, to move as a cure-all, I would argue that those people aren't coming to Ecuador. They're running from where they're coming from.
Yeah. And that's the mistake, exactly.
In every example that I can think of, as you were running through those examples, there's different people that were popping into my head, different clients that I've had interactions with, different expats that I've crossed paths with, in Loja, in Cuenca, in my travels around Ecuador, and those people always want to bend your ear, so you always hear a lot about them. And that's been, if I run through those things in my head, it's like, wow, yeah, no, all those people were looking for, they're looking for a unicorn, and unicorns don't walk the earth. So it is real life here. That's how it is.
Yeah.
It's a great place to have your real life, but being in Ecuador doesn't allow you to check out from that.
No, and in fact, last point on this, I would argue that whatever issues you have in your life will usually increase when you're put under stress, and you're going to be put under stress in a new culture with a new language.
Right. Absolutely.
So you've lived in Loja for around 3 years. You've lived in Cuenca for around 2 years. Give me the elevator speech, or however long you want to make it, Cuenca versus Loja.
The big difference, I would say, is that Cuenca, to me, in all of Ecuador, not just compared to Loja, is the easiest place for someone coming from the States. I'll use the States for an example.
Mm-hmm.
Coming to Latin America, or more specifically, coming to Ecuador, it's the easiest place to adjust to, I feel. You've got one of the largest expat communities. Between Americans, Canadians, Colombians, Peruvians, and Venezuelans, I think you're probably somewhere around 15 to 18,000. So it definitely has a different feel to it, and not quite as overwhelming as cities like Quito or Guayaquil. You've got a lot of the amenities. You've got not only just with things like the theater, the museums, the variety of the restaurants that you have here, but just also, the aesthetic of the city. The city is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's got all the architectural things that people want to see when they come to a city in Latin America. So that's what I would say about Cuenca, that I feel like people need to know. With respect to Loja, I think I penned an article way back when, that might still be on the website, just that description of Loja, and I think that's Loja's charm. Loja is a place where you see parents going to pick their kids up from school in the afternoon. It's a place where you know the same people forever. It's a place where when I go back every so often, I run into 20 people I know walking down the street, and we might stop and have a coffee for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Not worry about it. It's that kind of place. I keep in touch with a lot of people there, and I enjoy going there anytime I'm there, and I feel like it'd be one of the best places in the world that you could raise a family. It's that kind of thing. And then also, just being everything's so close. You can walk everywhere. You can get in the car. You can walk everywhere, but you can get in the car and drive 15 minutes and be at Podocarpus National Park, which I think is one of the best kept secrets if you like outdoor stuff in all of Ecuador. You got Vilcabamba, maybe 20 minutes down the road from there. So it's just it's quaint. It's the people, I think, are incredible, especially once you really get to know them. So I don't want to ramble, and I don't know that I've gotten so specific with things, but what I'm trying to describe is the feeling that I get being there, that I enjoy, that may be hard to convey, and maybe an experience that not everybody would have if they go there, but that's my experience. Hopefully that comes through.
Well said. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, if I really actually appreciate your answer. I think it was a great one. If I had to give the 30-second sort of like tangible differences, and let's keep in mind that I have not lived in Cuenca, so I don't have the same degree of experience there to really talk about it, but it's certainly a place I know a little bit. Much different sized places. So Cuenca, way bigger. Way more foreigners, as you mentioned. Way more things to do, as you mentioned. So museums and nightlife and all that stuff. Prettier, certainly like the downtown area anyway. Much better looking in Cuenca. Comes with some of the problems that a city has. So traffic is an issue in Cuenca. Just the general sort of city problems that you'd find in any city anywhere in the world. Loja's not really big enough of a city to have those problems. More of an international feel, Cuenca. People are more livelier. It's a faster pace, more business oriented, I would argue, even as well. Loja's is, and I think you described it beautifully. It's a city that functions as a town. Everybody knows each other. It's big, but it's tiny. It's a slow pace. People are very trusting and, for the most part, honest, and all the things you mentioned. There's a pretty significant difference in weather too. Cuenca is 1,500 or 1,700 or something feet higher. So it's quite a bit cooler. So there is definitely a difference there. I think that's sort of, for me, some of the...
If I would say probably on average in the cold season, you're probably talking about a 5 to 7 degree, maybe 5 to 8 degree difference at night on a cold night, which doesn't sound like a lot, but after you've been here for a while, your blood starts to thin out. It gets real.
I'm sitting in my office right now in a jacket. It's probably 70 degrees in my office.
So you know what I've turned into? Both of us grew up in the Northeast. I feel like that guy from Florida who comes up to visit. That cousin that you have or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know, maybe springtime, and it's one of those first warm days, 75, and it's like that day where every woman who's going to university or who's working, it's that first day where you can wear shorts or a skirt or short sleeves, and it's like everybody's just like summer's coming, that sort of feeling that you get, that buzz. It's like we feel like that, and that person in Florida is wearing the sweatshirt.
He's got a parka on, yeah.
I deal with this.
That's what you've turned into. Me too. I mean, I might have always been that, but I'm definitely that now.
The guy who was like, 4 seasons and all that stuff, and having come out on the other side of that, people talk about I love the 4 seasons are 7 out of 10 of them are in the sun.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I was going to give a off-color analogy. I won't do it, but yes, I agree with you. Like the change is nice in short spurts, but not 6 months of winter.
No, and I would never do that.
Yeah, no.
Not for all the money in the world,
So, 5.5 years in, more or less. What do you think?
Pros and cons. But I could have had pros and cons anywhere. Had I stayed at home, it would have been that way. Life happens everywhere. Overall, I'm really, really happy here. I like it. I feel content. Maybe that's a way of putting it. It's difficult to sort of run back through all the experiences that you've had, to try to encapsulate it for somebody. But it's a move that I've been having.
Yeah.
And I think the experiences going through the culture shock, learning the language, I think it's helped me get to know myself better.
Interesting.
A lot more self-awareness. And I think that you'd have a hard time avoiding that if you came here.
Yeah.
And had the same opinion that I have.
Yeah. I agree.
And you stayed here that long, I don't think that could come without that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what comes to mind when you say that, it's like to thrive here or to be happy here, to acculturate. Yeah, so many of your like beliefs and opinions and like what you believe about stuff it's gonna be examined if you acculturate, like if you are here long enough to acculturate.
That's a great word in that context too, examine.
Yeah, because I mean, it is not possible, in my opinion, to come here and thrive if your ethos or your the base off of which you like interact in the world is what works in the States, and you maintain that, it is not possible to do really well here. I don't mean, look, could you come as like a retiree and sort of stay in your cocoon and live a good life? Of course. But if you're coming and you've got kids and you're going to be dealing with schools and businesses and jobs and friends and holidays and, life here, government and, trámites and you're going to be dealing with all this stuff, you're going to have to
be prepared.
Yeah. You're going to have to really, like, your ego is going to have to, like, and you're really going to have to, if anyone's listening on the podcast, I was lowering my hand there if you couldn't see. But, you're really going to have to examine yourself, tweak some beliefs, roll with the punches, and learn how to be effective here, because being effective here is not the same. Your approach cannot be the same as it could from where I'm from.
In a lot of ways, I feel like a totally different person.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. This conversation got a lot deeper than I expected.
I feel like we've hit just the right level of depth.
So you don't want to go into your childhood traumas right now? I get a lot of questions, I know you do as well, about, and I've had some experiences with clients, of course, as well, with medical care in the country. Quite frankly, it's quite a bit better in Cuenca than it is in Loja. It's good in Loja. You can get good medical care here, but for serious stuff, you're going to end up in Cuenca for a lot of things. And there's even a...
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I have some good friends from Loja who've actually 3 or 4 people I've talked to in the last couple of months who've come here to Cuenca. We've ended up connecting because they came here.
Yeah.
So for serious things, certainly expats do, and certainly Ecuadorians do in Loja.
Absolutely.
Go back and forth.
Yeah, and there's even a few things, correct me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding, there's even a few things that Cuencanos would end up in Quito or Guayaquil potentially. Even another step up. But what would be your overall perspective sort of on the quality of care here, and what an expat can... It's such a stupid word, expat, but what somebody who's not from here, who comes to live, can expect as far as medical care in Ecuador?
Well, I would say, in general, a lot more attention and care than one would expect in the United States for a fraction of the cost. could start
I
thinking.
I feel like you must have wrote that down beforehand, but I know you didn't. That was that was well said.
Yeah, and I can talk about that in my own experience. You were with me when I almost chopped my finger off, down to the bone with the machete, and you know,
and screamed when at the top of your lungs when you saw it.
You know, it was more. It wasn't the pain because the
No.
blade was so sharp. I mean, all I felt was the heat. I didn't feel
Yeah.
the pain.
Yeah.
It was the shock of seeing my bone
Well, and a lot of blood.
in a lot of blood. That I think might have given me a plastic bag or something like that to tie it up. I don't even know.
No, I think basically we just ran to the car. Yeah, I mean, you might have put something on it. I don't remember, but
Kind of a blur at this point. But yeah, I mean, I thought the care was excellent.
and so that was, yeah. I mean, when that happened, that was emergency care, which in Ecuador is covered under, everyone has it. It's universal.
They might have changed that now since with the whole immigration and healthcare law, but at the time, I didn't have permanent residency. I think I was still on a tourist visa.
Oh, that's right, because you had those visa issues early on, yeah.
And they ended up stitching me up 10 stitches in my finger, and which is a lot for a finger. And I didn't pay a dime.
Yeah.
I would say that's
And you got reasonably good attention. Yeah, I mean, I had a client recently. Insurance is something that's very different here, and I'm not gonna. Oh, go ahead. If you want to jump into that, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and then also for the non-emergency care, I had seen. I've only seen maybe a primary care physician maybe 2 or 3 times. You just pay out of pocket. I just went and saw the doctor, and he sat down with me and gave me his attention and listened to what I needed, and I felt like the bedside manner, for lack of a better term, was excellent. And at that point, I couldn't really speak Spanish, so kind of going through that thing with him. And that's another thing about the culture, I think, of certainly of in general in Ecuador, but particularly in Loja. This was in Loja where I saw the guy at the St. Augustine clinic, which I think is probably still the foremost clinic in Loja, where people who are going to a private doctor normally go. And yeah, I mean, I thought it was excellent. As good as my primary care physician back home, which who I had from when I was 12 years old to when I left. So.
Yeah, and you spend. I mean, I don't know if it's slightly higher in Cuenca or not, but you spend, generally speaking, $30 if you're paying out of pocket on a doctor visit in Loja.
Yeah, mine was. I think to see him, if I'm not mistaken, was $30.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty standard around most of the country. I don't think you're gonna find someone who's gonna charge you even in Guayaquil more than $50.
Yeah, I mean, which is just absurd when you think about back home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a client recently, and actually he's someone I want to bring on the show just to chat about his experiences. He's been here for a little over a year now, I believe. And he needed like an emergency, semi-emergency, not like this second, but quickly, eye surgery. Basically, he lost his vision in one eye, and it was unclear like what was going on. And he was in Vilcabamba. He ended up having to go to Cuenca for the surgery. But his opinion, he's a guy from Texas, from the States. His opinion is that he received excellent care in Cuenca. And he ended up paying out of pocket for 2 surgeries. It came out to like somewhere around $3,000 for 2 eye operations. So.
I also had a very close friend of mine from Loja, who's in her 20s. I think a couple years ago she had come to. This is actually when I was still in Loja. She had come here to get a major hip procedure done. She was born with a degenerative hip situation, and there was some doctor from the foremost doctor who handles those kinds of hip issues. Is from Chile and lives here in Cuenca and did the surgery. So, and we've been in touch since, and no issues. And that was maybe the third or fourth procedure that she had done in her life. And it should be one of the last ones, if not the last one. She came to Cuenca from Loja to do that as well. Or, excuse me, came from Loja to Cuenca.
To Cuenca, yeah. Investment opportunities, entrepreneurial opportunities in the short version. What do you see in Cuenca these days? Or the Cuenca region, I should say.
Cuenca region. I think, and I think you could say this about lots of places in Ecuador. I think really the biggest opportunity for me here in Ecuador is agriculture. Agriculture, tourism, anything related to industrial production of things that are normally imported to Ecuador that can be substituted.
That's interesting, yeah.
The tax code is certainly written for people to do those things, and I think that when you look at the diversity of climates and topography, size, the amount of investments that are going on in the ports here in Ecuador, the quality of the roads. I think that there's very few countries in the world, and then also just the location of Ecuador, geographically, being so close to the Panama Canal, being on the Pacific Ocean, being able to get products east and west, as well as north. The free trade agreement that they have with the EU.
Yeah.
Free trade agreements that they have with countries like Chile and Mexico. There's talks of negotiating one with the States. There was one signed with, I forget the name of the organization, but it's countries like the Nordic countries, essentially Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, that they signed the agreement with this year. The length of the growing season, the amount of things that you can grow, there's just so much that so many raw materials that you can source if you have the know-how and you have the equipment to process it. And I think the opportunities are endless in those sectors.
Yeah.
So single Cuenca out necessarily in that, but I think being an interior port, and having the infrastructure for industry here, I think certainly be a place that plays a role.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead.
One more thing.
No, please.
Going back to the tax code stuff, if you're looking at establishing a business in Cuenca versus Guayaquil or Quito, obviously those are the big cities, but you have a lot of the same infrastructure that you have there. And if you're looking at on the margin, okay, I could get baseline 2, maybe even more extra years of income tax free status. That on the margin, that could make a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I mean, this is like maybe a cutthroat way to say it, but the labor market's very soft in Ecuador as well. So there's a lot of, supply for labor. One of the dreams of mine here is to buy a big piece of land and do a huge superfoods farm and create product lines for domestic sales, but also for export. Superfoods product lines, and so and I've done some research on that, and there is a lot of beautiful opportunities in agriculture. I agree with you there. As I look at investing, and I'm slanted towards real estate just because of what I do and the way I look at the world, but I believe that there's a huge mispriced asset when it comes to real estate in Ecuador of rural land. If you take urban land in Ecuador, it's not cheap. And I'm gonna include in urban land towns. So, for example, population centers of any size. In other words, any piece of land relatively close to the center square of any town or city in Ecuador. Cities, obviously, that's much larger size, but it's not cheap. I mean, in Cuenca,
especially in the mountains.
Especially in the mountains, yeah. In Cuenca, these prices are much higher, but even in Loja, a sleepy little city here, you're paying at the lowest end in the worst neighborhood or the outskirts, you're paying $100 a square meter for lots in Loja, and in downtown, somewhere like where people really want to be, you're paying anywhere from like $800 to like $2,000 a square, $800 to like $2,000 a square meter in the most attractive places. So these are like not cheap. This is not cheap. But I can go out and buy beautiful pieces of land that are huge, or they can be anywhere from decent size to huge for $1 a square meter, less even in many cases, 50 cents a square meter. And then I can bring in the infrastructure, make them beautiful, and subdivide them, and make a killing if we're talking from an investment standpoint, which I think is a great business and that's partly the reason that business works is because the domestic demand is not there for that. Ecuadorians don't want to live in those places. And so if you're doing developments like that, you're doing them more for foreigners, but then once they're built and they're beautiful, everyone buys them. Foreigners and domestic and Ecuadorians alike.
Point about rural land, because from my perspective and experience, what calls people to Ecuador are either those urban properties that I described before, the Archbishop's house in the center of downtown, or that home that's built in those picturesque rolling hills where you feel like you're in the mountains and the sound of music.
Right. You can put a great image in my head here.
So it's really one or the other.
Yeah.
If you want something in between, why come to Ecuador?
Yeah.
Because you can find that thing much better lots of other places.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about those properties that really, where you look at it and say, wow, I really want that. It's one or the other here in Ecuador.
Yeah.
And I would agree with you wholeheartedly. If you build it, they will come, but you have to build it. And
yeah.
That's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's one of my favorites. If I had to, and we should probably leave this conversation soon. We've been going a while, but if I had to sort of just sum up for me personally, like in a couple of sentences, what I like and dislike about life here. So you mentioned the growing season. The quality and abundance of fruits and vegetables, and even meat if you're a meat eater, is unparalleled. I mean, I don't mean unparalleled anywhere in the world. I haven't done that much traveling, but coming from the U.S. Food distribution system and the way that whole thing works, I mean, it's just wonderful here. The way you can eat if you choose to source your stuff from good places or grow it yourself, even better.
I would add to that too, is how many the fact that you can have a personal relationship with the people that you get.
Exactly, and often do. I mean, I do with all of them almost. There's a level of personal interaction here that is very different than where I come from. Relationships are much less transactional. So, I come from a culture and a society where most interactions are transactional. It's like, I provide you this, you pay me this much, it'll take this much time, and we shake hands and go our separate ways. That philosophy just doesn't really exist here, and it does a little bit in the big cities, and it's creeping in from here and there. But in general, when you're dealing with anybody here, you're dealing with a human being. They're treating you as such. They may be screwing you or telling you no. That's a separate issue. But they're you're having a human interaction 100%, basically 100% of the time.
I would 100% agree with you, and at the same time describe it slightly different.
Go ahead.
From our perspective, it would be a less transactional relationship, but I would almost argue that that's how transactional relationships take place in Ecuador.
Yeah.
It's not less transactional, it just plays out in a different way.
Yeah.
Creates a space for that personal interaction.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. I think that's a very subtle point, and I don't know if people will get it or not. Maybe they will. But I think I get what you're saying, and I actually agree completely. Yeah.
Well, one person who watches this gets it, then I feel like I've done my
Yeah, well, you're batting 1,000 so far. So, yeah, that for me, the negatives for me here are really the hoops you have to jump through to get things done. To me, is the biggest negative by far. It's like I was researching recently how to travel with, and I've done this for clients coming in a bunch of times, but how to travel with pets out of the country, and I was so I was researching it both for the States and for Ecuador, because I was thinking about taking my 2 dogs with me when I travel. And for the dogs to enter the U.S., you need one thing. And mind you, the U.S. is a heavily regulated country. The U.S. is not like the bastion of freedom that it claims to be. You needed one thing to enter. You needed a vaccine certificate. Ecuador had a list like this of prerequisites to in or out. So you have to spend 3 weeks dealing with them and finessing and paying and bring this certificate over here and then pay over there and and everything is like that here. Everything. And so.
And if you're taking out a pet and taking a pet out of this country for your sake and probably just as much for theirs, it should probably be a one-way trip.
Why?
Well, just because all those hoops.
Yeah.
For a round trip, it's like
yeah.
If you're coming to the country and don't plan on leaving, you should just leave the dog there.
Yeah.
Because I've seen some and heard horror stories of what animals go through. People, if you travel with your animal, I feel like people who travel with their animals have a closer bond with their animals than somebody who wouldn't. And so, people, at least in my experience looking at this, people who would think about traveling with their animals, they look at their animals as their children. And so, if they fear or have a sense that the dog's being mistreated or not being cared for, people aren't looking after it, or it's being neglected, or what have you, people really feel that. And I've seen, there was one story, I was going through the Miami airport last year, and there was a dog that had thrown up and pooped itself and was in a kennel in baggage claim. And the thing was yelping. It was so uncomfortable and so painful. And hearing the thing, it was like listening to, the bark sounded like nails on a chalk. And this was constant. I'm sitting there waiting for my baggage for maybe 40 minutes and just hearing this dog nonstop. And the smell coming out of that kennel was, if I had a more sensitive stomach, I might have thrown up. It was that bad. Oh, and I think there's some people that, and more people than you might think, would get emotional about something like that. If there's goggles on.
Sure. You can't relate to that. I take it you're not a dog person.
No, I mean, I am a dog person, but just not in that way.
Yeah.
I wouldn't look at it that way. As
Yeah.
I'm talking about this as like a conscientious observer.
Right. You're not going to be doing any protests anytime soon.
Not about that.
No, or anything up yet. Yeah, but yeah, and I'll leave it there. Just the last thing I wanted to say about that, just to the paperwork for pets is like you can get caught up in bureaucratic quagmires here that just you can spend the rest of your life working on some piece of paper that you need to do something, that you need to do something else, And I've been working on doing an amojamiento, which is like I know but legally clarifying boundaries of a property. I've been working on one for myself for like a year now, and I'm nowhere on it. And you want to talk about like hilarious like Ecuador stories? I'm out in this rural place, close to the city, but rural. You obviously know the property, but where I'm waiting for a guy to come off the mountain on his donkey with his 8 horses because 8 dogs, because I need to talk to him about signing this piece of paper, and he's happy to sign it, except that his father's sick and he doesn't have the escritura because he's in his own bureaucratic quagmire, because when someone dies here, if you don't have enough money to fix all the paperwork, you never get legal title to it. You just have acciones, derechos y acciones, like you have possession basically, but you can sell possession, but you can't sell you can't sell a title because you don't have one. So he doesn't have a title, so he can't sign. And then I'm trying to get
process that to extract a property from a dead person's name.
It's no joke.
That's a process that a fast one will take 6 months.
Yeah, very fast. Yeah, that's best case scenario. Yeah. So I'm doing that. Then I'm dealing with some of the underbelly of Ecuadorian society, which is that people don't, even though in a certain way people are incredibly trusting, in a different way, they don't trust each other at all, and so
they always have to. They have to observe the ritual of behaving as if they trusted people.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so I need people to sign stuff, which is just declaring boundaries, but they don't. There's that whole like, what am I signing thing? Am I getting ripped off? Because it wasn't that long ago here, like whoever had physical possession of the title owned the property. So stuff like that actually went on, where people got duped out of properties and things like that. And so, and then so this went on and on and on. And so it's just an example. And this is to me the most negative thing about the country is you want to do something and then it becomes very difficult when it shouldn't.
There's a lot of, in just navigating that whole cultural thing. The two of us have rough and tumbled that whole underbelly of I say I trust you, but I don't really, and having to observe that and intuit what add meaning to what was going on in front of us, and that's been quite the experience. That is just one that's constant. I feel like I'm always picking up some little thing here and there about those interactions and how to navigate them better, and it really is an interesting experience. That's probably my least favorite thing about Ecuador too. We can talk about that for a while as well too, but I think we're kind of running short on time. But yeah, I guess that's the last thing I would say about it. It's navigating those situations, working through them, is just part of life here.
Yes, it is, and unfortunately, it can be a large part of life, and it goes back to rolling with the punches and smiling and being friendly and making friends and talking, and that's just how you get stuff done. So
keeping it in perspective as well. That's it.
Yes, that's big. Well, Darnell, we've covered a lot. Actually, I think it was a good conversation. I very much appreciate you coming on. It's good to see you, and
appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh. Last thing before I let you go, which I almost forgot, is how can people, if people are interested in Cuenca region, I know you cover some of the some of the attractive places like Yunguilla and some of those other towns surrounding Cuenca. How can they get in touch with you? Do you got a website, email, phone? How can people?
Great. Thanks for that, Jesse. I didn't even think about that, so I appreciate the reminder. Yeah, so people can reach me. You can see properties at www.expatrealtycuenca.com. That's expatrealtycuenca.com. We also have an Ecuador MLS page. So if you were to Google Expat Realty Cuenca, that would come up as well too. Have a lot of properties there. Also, if you look for properties, search Ecuador properties on a website called escapeartist.com. I also have a presence there. And you can reach me by phone at least outside of the country, at 593-593-940. I'll say that one more time. 593-98440-5991, or by email at Dunn.Darnell@gmail.com. So DUNN.Darnell, DARNELL@gmail.com. So any of those ways are fine. The phone number is set up with FaceTime, WhatsApp. So people can reach me in a number of ways. I appreciate the plug there.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you again, my friend, and have an excellent night.
Okay, thanks. You too.
Okay.